The real question is, where is fulfillment coming from? Our fulfillment as human beings, where is it coming from? It's not coming from jobs anymore, people, and jobs are dying. Someday, 50 years, 100 years from now, there might be no jobs. People might not work full time. In fact, many people might not even work at all. This is a depressing book. It's called The Secrets of Consulting by Jerry Weinstein. Fellow was consulting in the computer industry in the 70s and 80s. I think the first version of this was written in 85. And it's still valid today. Why? Because human nature has not changed. And why do I say it's depressing? Because he thinks you can't really ever solve problems. First of all, the client has to be committed to solving the problem. And when they bring in a consultant, often they're trying to just pass the buck off to somebody else and hope that they can do it. They think that there's a technical problem. Well, as Jerry points out in the book, behind a technical problem is always a people problem. It's always a people problem. They don't want to acknowledge it. If they don't want to acknowledge reality, what are the chances that the problem's going to get fixed? That's depressing, right? And if you're an expert and you have all the knowledge, you can't transfer that to somebody else and expect them to get it instantly. Especially if it's a complex task or a complex concept. It's just not going to happen. There's all these things that we've talked about in this video series. Things like comfort zone, right? The view a person has of themselves, their self-concept, and how screwed up that is, right? How it's been affected by everybody under the sun from an early age on down until they just blindly believe, I am this person, I have these attributes, I'm good at this, I'm not good at that, okay? Now, about tools here. Now, I'm using a little point-and-shoot Sony Cybercam there, the CyberShot. It's a fantastic camera, and it gets light balance really well, especially for this office area and that. I got this, okay? Like, I own a bunch of digital cameras. I have a bit of a collection of them. And this is a Nikon. It's a nice camera, right? It's big, it's got a huge lens, and you would think that it would produce a better video than the little CyberShot that I'm using there, but it doesn't. Okay, for some reason, I don't know if that one's a more recent generation and that's what does it. This is a lovely camera with a lot of settings, but again, I have this tool. I don't really know how to get the most out of this tool. I've downloaded a few books. I haven't had time to read them yet, but this has been sitting around for a month or so. I got it off of a guy on Craigslist for way cheaper than what he deserved, but that's what he wanted, you know. I thought it was a good deal. But again, I can have the best tool in the world, but if my client can't use it, or I can't use it, what good is it, right? These are things to be thinking about here. I love how he talks in here, Jerry, about if you solve the number one problem, now what? And he uses this great example of working in a grocery store as a teenager. And he's working at stocking the produce section. And the produce manager says, hey, Jerry, you got any ideas, right? And he says, well, I've been noticing these rutabagas have just been sitting there. Like, I know these rutabagas by name, you know, and what they like to do during the day, how they look, how they grow, and all that, right? Why don't we just get rid of them? Nobody's buying them. And the guy goes, great. And he gets a banana box and he sweeps the rutabagas off into them and sets them aside and looks at the empty space on the shelf and then says, okay, well, sport, what's the next least popular vegetable, and what should we do about that? And it just smacked him in the head right then. He understood, like, well, what now? Like, what should we do? Should we get rid of all of the vegetables, right? Where does it end is the question here. So what I'm trying to talk about today is the difficulties of consulting, and you do this all the time. If you're a staffer in an organization, you've actually been brought in to consult to give your expertise and your advice on solving a particular problem. If you're a staff writer, you're brought in to consult on that. If you're a programmer, about that, right? And they'll try and mess with your head and get you to keep your head down and all that, right? Don't rock the boat. But that is really what you're there for, is to give advice. So all of us are consulting all the time, provided that the key thing that he says in here is that the information or the help has to be requested by somebody. If you're dictatorially, shoving your way into somebody else's life and giving them unasked for advice, then that's not very good or very effective. right? So that's a key there. It has to be asked for. I've been reading through a lot of consulting books, manual type books lately, and for me, there's not a lot of new information in there, but there are reminders or commonalities that get repeated over and over again, regardless of the era. Again, this book's from the 80s. I've got books from 2000 and more recently in that, and nothing really seems to change. That's what's strange about especially technology consulting. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, these same big companies had technology problems, and giant companies like SAP moved in to try and help them, and here it is 20, 30 years later, and what's changed? Nothing. They still have the same problems. So the problems that we have are not of a technological nature. It appears that way. But actually, the problem is a person problem. It's of a person nature. Okay? Resistance to change is one. Well, why is there resistance to change? Sometimes there's a darn good reason. Because the idea got forced from the top down and it has no bearing on the actual reality of the line employees day to day. You wouldn't believe. The high-level executives that I talk to, business development executives in large organizations, they have no connection, zero connection with what's going on the ground floor with their sales staff. They haven't got a clue what their sales staff are struggling with. They're interested in P&L, they're interested in pro forma income statements and the next quarter's targets. And that is a symptom of a problem that I think we should talk about. Because if shareholder value is the only KPI that we're really interested in, we're dead. We're in big trouble. Because growing shareholder value is not in line with the long-term growth of the organization. It sounds crazy, actually, to say it that way, but it's not. I don't want to be eliminating people. Okay? I don't want to be eliminating positions. I want to increase capacity. I may want to take you off this and put you on that, but I don't want you leaving the organization. I'll tell you why. You have institutional knowledge as an employee. You've been there, you've seen it, you've seen how things are done, and most importantly, on that ground level where the rubber meets the road, you're interacting with the market, the customer. You're getting the feedback. And that's where innovation comes from. It doesn't come from somebody sitting in an ivory tower and just magically coming up with stuff. Not that smart. Do companies have R&D labs? Of course, but you would hope that they weren't just doing pure research. Let's go find out what the interior of a black hole looks like. Well, we make calculators, what the heck? There's no matchup there, right? So there's got to be that matchup between the target market and what the company is doing. But here's why I don't want to get rid of people and positions, because you can only cut so far. And this works in huge organizations and with you and your personal budget. You know you can only cut so far. Scrimp and save. Start eating ramen noodles. It only goes so far. Eventually, the smart move is to actually increase your earning capacity. That's what you have to do. And if you're a business owner, you should be thinking about that. How can I increase our earning capacity? Which means providing more value to your customers. Getting a better matchup with your customers, their problems, your solutions, your people and their people. Okay? Because I'll tell you something, there's this huge concentration on big data and computers and that, and I got nothing against that. There's no axe to grind here, but I will tell you something. No computer has ever been able to postulate a thesis. No computer, to this point, has come up with an original idea. Now you can feed instructions into a computer, give it all the data and say, look, find trends for me. But the idea of what to look for, that comes from you. That comes from a human being. And you cannot replace that to this point with a computer. Maybe someday you will. But to this point, even with all the big data, and big data is not all it's cracked up to be. They built this huge data pond or data lake and all that, right? The results that they expected from that, they're not there. They're just not there. So we're not there yet. Technology is not the solution, and I don't think it ever will be. People are the solution. A culture without fear, a culture without looking over your shoulders. Is this a career-limiting move? Damn, I better not do that. I better not open my mouth. I better not share my experience, because that could be a career-limiting move. Right? I don't want to work for an organization like that ever again. Okay? As an employee or as a consultant. I don't want to do it, because that's just stupid thinking. dictatorial, top-down organizations, your day is over. It is over. Okay? We need a lot more input from the front line, actual data coming up. Now, are there challenges with this? Of course, and it's going to take 20, 30 years, maybe more, to get this fully integrated. It's starting now. I'm working with some organizations that are doing this now, but it is going to take time for it to become the norm. And I realize it's not, but it's something that we all need to be thinking of. How satisfied are you with your life? Do you think it's okay, as our parents and grandparents did, to go to a job and be told what to do and be boxed in and try and get your fulfillment out of that? The real question is, where is fulfillment coming from? Our fulfillment as human beings, where is it coming from? It's not coming from jobs anymore, people, and jobs are dying. Someday, 50 years, 100 years from now, there might be no jobs. People might not work full-time. In fact, many people might not even work at all. I was talking with a European colleague today, and he mentioned that the Swiss just had a vote on giving everyone a minimum guaranteed income of, I think, around $2,500. It failed for now. And I'm not saying that's a good idea or a bad idea. I, for one, do not want to support tons of people sitting around in little apartments watching TV and eating Doritos all day. Not interested in doing that. But in terms of the safety and security starting point for people to come out at, like, yeah, I'm not terrified I'm going to be kicked out onto the street, okay. I have some sympathy in that direction for you, okay? But I want to see you working too. So the question, it comes back to, what's fulfilling these days, now, for you as an individual? You know, the whole idea of jobs and a structured workforce and a replaceable parts kind of mentality comes only recently, only in the last few hundred years, couple hundred years, from the Industrial Revolution on up. Before that, you had a lot of sole traders going around. And I really like this model. I'm talking about people who owned one or two ships, maybe a little bit more, sometimes just maybe one though, and they'd go around Europe. They'd go from, I don't know, England and get sheep, and they'd go to Italy and get wine, and they'd take that to Spain and they'd get steel and brandy from there and go back up to England and sell the brandy and steel there, right? This is what went on. The whole idea of a structured utilitarian schooling system that trained a dumb workforce with low expectations to go out there and do a mind-numbing job for 40 years and then retire to what? What exactly? And then they died 10 years later out of sheer boredom. That's gone. Like that whole concept, we know it's dying. Our school systems suck. They really suck. And it's not the teacher's fault. They're being given their marching orders. So I would like to initiate some kind of thought process in you about what is fulfillment. What is fulfilling? Because doors have been opened for us that were not open even for our parents. Our parents were still locked in that do your job for 30 years, keep your head down. Each decade should be better than the last. Pay off your house, pay off your mortgage, go on some holidays and retire. That's not the dream that I have. That's not the goal that I have. So I hope you found this discussion interesting. I know I've hopped around a little bit. I've tried to talk about problem solving and business and individual fulfillment and that, because I think all these topics are interrelated. I really do think they're all interrelated. And I don't think you can solve problems without getting into the right mindset. I talk about mindset a lot. If you think you're an island, if you think you're bulletproof, if you think you're impervious to anybody else and not touching anyone else, basically, you got a problem. You really do, because we are all interacting with each other. My neighbor, if I bomb my neighbor, I'm actually hurting myself. If I go over there and hit him with chemical warfare, I'm hurting myself. And we all need to get into that kind of a mentality, because once you're a lot more careful about where you put your foot down. And you're also a lot more careful about protecting yourself too, right? But protecting yourself means participating in a world with your neighbors. An uncooperative world is not one in which I live or wish to live. This is Jason Kanigan from Sales on Fire. Thanks for watching, and I hope I got you thinking.